My name is Rita Macedo. I'm also a member of the Art History Institute and part of the research cluster Museums and Digital Culture. And I'm really excited to be here moderating this conversation. As you already know, we don't have a presentation format, so the guests will respond to some questions around the topics of the panel. So when we discussed these digital technologies and digital cultures in the Art Museum, we are clearly dealing with several changes and challenges that impact many areas of the museum, ranging from collections care to digitized heritage, which include issues of curation, human resources, organization and skills, audience engagement, power and knowledge distribution, participation, democracy, social justice. Well, the list is big and serious. So I will now open up the debate with a general question to warm up. And I would start by asking, what are the most critical areas in which digital technologies are changing the way we understand the art museum and its ecosystem? Maybe we can start with Ana Carvalho.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So let's start. I think it's difficult to say which areas are the most critical. I think, in a way, I think all areas of museum work are somehow changing or being affected by digital technologies. You know, like Rita said, from management, for communication, conservation, education, I think collections management, to exhibition, to collections management, audience engagement. I think it's from back office to front of house, from the most visible tasks to the public eye to the most invisible. I think if we imagine or realize that digital technologies are somehow shaping our behaviors in our personal life every day, I think it's also expected that digital technologies also shape museums in all its dimensions and functions. So that, you know, museums are not, at least I don't see them like islands, somehow apart from society. Of course, in practice, how museums approach or use digital technologies, it really depends on each museum vision, how museum envisions these approaches, and of course, which resources they have to really face these challenges. To give you an example of how we have been at least approaching this field, or how digital technologies are affecting museums. In our task group, Museums for the Future, it was a task group that was created by the Ministry of Culture last year to set recommendations for public policy. We really perceived, we used digital transformation. I think it's more broad idea about the changes that are going on, and we saw it a very transversal topic where I think the digital crosses all areas of museum activity. So my answer would be, of course, it's all areas I think are critical because they are so interconnected to what museums do. So it's what I envision.
But if you had to choose one of these areas, which one would you choose as the more affected by this, for example, after the pandemic, for these new challenges?
I think I would choose collections because from collections you can create digital content. From collections you can make exhibitions from this kind of. So I think collections are objects. So I would start by that, because they are the source of what we do. So that would be the starting point, but all the areas are so interconnected, so it's like a chain. So
okay, thank you very much. Maybe we can hear Emilia about this issue. You are in this position as head of the National Museum of Contemporary Art. What's your experience about this situation?
Oh, hello, good evening, good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with debating all these issues. Well, for us, it was quite a challenge when on the 13th of March, we knew that we were going to work from home and that the museum would be closed and that we would have to do something to keep in touch with our audiences. We sketched on the spot a whole program to keep that dialogue with our visitors, even if this dialogue was to move to the digital, to a digital mean. And one of the problems was exactly the lack of means, the lack of technological means and the lack of technological expertise. We came across, we wanted to show the collection. We had a lot of artworks that were already documented, obviously, photographically and historically speaking, but we needed the effective means to show them, to keep a dialogue with the visitors that was going to be shifted from the place itself, from the museum, where you have all the time in the world to be in front of the artworks and to relate to them, to a completely different support that is a screen. No scale, a different notion of time, a total impossibility to relate to the object in its physical form. So how do we manage, how do we do this? This was a problem, obviously. And in the beginning, we thought that maybe we could start by providing some digital tours. There was a lot of demand on this. People were asking us, and not only us, but all museums, I think, to provide some digital tours of the exhibitions that were still on inside the museum. But we didn't have the means to do that. We tried to create a digital tour, but we found out very rapidly that it was not going to happen. We couldn't do it properly. So we decided to tell stories. And stories are always a safe side because everybody likes stories. We are always telling stories to each other. So we invested on it. And we used what we had, all the instruments that we already had with us to tell these stories. And it worked. And after some time, we even found out, we even discovered a paper that was exactly theorizing about these issues and thinking and saying that the digital tours were out in less than a week. People were fed up with that and they wanted stories. And we were so glad that we didn't have the original means to waste, in a way, to waste our times doing that. But we sometimes to have less is to have sometimes, and most times, I think, obstacles are a way of infinite possibilities, are ways of possibilities. So it depends on the way you look at things. So for me and for us at NAC, we tend to, we don't have the means we would like to have. I think nobody does, actually. But anyway, with what we have, we try to do the best we can. We don't have the financial means, we don't have the technological means or the human resources. So what we do is to adapt to the circumstances to the best of our knowledge and to make whatever we can with the little we have. And so what did we do? We decided, as I said, to create these stories. We showed the collection in a different light. And we we passed from 4,000 followers to 25,000 followers.
Wow.
Yeah, so we were quite happy with that. And now, of course, I can understand what Anna was saying, that the collections are always central to a museum. I think that's the main issue. A museum is its collections first of all. But then the way you deal with that and the way you deal with digital now, I think there is too much noise, too much ado about little, not to say about nothing, but about little, because every time there's a change coming, we resist to that change. But we all know that those who do not adapt die. So we have to adapt. We have to adapt. That doesn't mean that we have to forget the collections and move on to digital. No, we have to get the best of the two worlds, because digital doesn't give us a lot of things like time, space, experience, and emotion. And museums still do. So we can deal with both worlds, I think.
So we'll talk about that later. I'll just would like to ask Meret, if you have, if you'd like to respond to these most critical areas in which digital technologies are changing the way we understand the museum.
Yes, certainly, and I can just complement what Anna and Emilia have already laid out, because obviously we're in museums. I totally understand and agree with your argumentation, but I think that the most critical thing that the general technological development is changing for museums is that it's shifting the focus from the museum and from the collection to people, because people now have a voice. They have the opportunity to participate. They can tell us if they like or don't like what we're doing, and they can tell us both through many different channels. By, for instance, supporting your efforts during the lockdown and raising your numbers like that. That's a very powerful way of telling you that you're doing something relevant. And they can also tell us by not showing up. Some of the things that we have been most focused on in our efforts as museums for decades, like exhibition catalogs, research publications, these like core elements of museum practice, is being challenged by, if you look at the numbers of how many people interact with those kinds of things, and then you shift your focus to channels where many more people interact. It's interesting, it's thought-provoking. I don't mean to say that the numbers are the only answer, because the research we put out has a depth in meaning and in the way it moves our knowledge forward, even though it only pertains to a smaller section of users. But I like to make sure that as museum professionals, we are aware of the huge numbers of people that we can reach if we also put some of our efforts in new channels. For instance, Wikipedia. That's one of the big potentials for our knowledge producing institutions today. At SMK, we've been working closely with the Danish Wikipedia chapter for 7 years. And when we compare the numbers of people who find our online collection on our own platforms and compare that with how many people encounter us on Wikipedia, the difference is just quite staggering. We have maybe 1 million users on our website or our online collection a year. We have up to 40 million interactions on Wikipedia. So it's just to say that digital technologies have a potential for democratizing access to our museums. And I would also like to stress, I strongly agree with what you said, Emilia, that museums in the classical sense as physical places where there's this unique thing you can encounter. You can encounter original auratic objects, and you can be together in a room to enjoy that. It's a very special thing, and we should safeguard that in society. But what we can do with digital technologies can complement that, I think.
Yes, that's it. Thank you very much. So you already said that the museum is doing a better job than before in communicating with audiences in this period. And you also said that the physical space of the museum is still very important because it's there where we can fill time in a different, like Emilia said, in a different way, and also connect more to our emotions. So I would like to focus on the relationship between the physical space of the museum and its online activities. And I would like to ask you if you could give us a successful example of an activity carried out in the museum, complemented with online activities where the synergy becomes effective or apparent. Who would like to respond?
Well, I can start if you don't mind. We would love to have done more than we have been doing, exactly to expand the results of or the numbers or the public service that the museum has to be, in my view. So what I mean with this is that we have been doing a lot of work inside the museum after the shutdown, after the moment where we all went back to the museum. And what we have observed now is a difficulty to bring people back to the museum. So the thing is that now we keep on having a lot of attention on social media, for example, a lot of attention on the digital world, but not as much as we would like to have on in situ. So of course, I totally agree with Mariette. The digital can be a wonderful tool to reach a wider audience everywhere. So it's a very democratic tool. But the thing is that now we need to use it to our benefit. We need to bring people back to the museum. And this is a challenge now because they are very comfortable. Some of them are still scared to go out. They are still scared to go to the museums, even though they go to supermarkets where there's a lot more people than inside a museum. But they feel so comfortable at home that they tend to think that it's good enough. Okay, it can be quite good, but maybe, and just maybe, it's not good enough. It's the same as we all standing here. We are all inside our cocoons and we are seeing each other, but we cannot look at each other in the eye, isn't it? We cannot touch the other. We cannot do anything that in a museum, in a real space, we can do. So I don't have exactly a success story of an activity that had been done in the museum and that was helped by the digital to reach wider audiences. What I have is the opposite. And I'm still struggling to go to the second phase. And it's a struggle, I can assure you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your honest answer. Mariette, do you have a successful example of that you know of, or where you participated?
I would say if we want to focus on the times we are standing in right now, with COVID-19 that is so shaping everything that we are working on in the museum. I think it's too early to say if different efforts have been successful. But one thing that I would like to bring forward is that during the lockdown in the spring, we could feel a strong demand from teachers for, not just because we were putting a lot of educational materials online, trying to support all the families that were home teaching their kids, and also school classes, teachers that needed inspiration for this new kind of virtual classroom setup. And the feedback was, great that you're trying to support us with new materials, with artworks in high quality and great storytelling and ideas how to interact. But what we're really missing is, in fact, the collaboration between museum professionals and teachers, educators in the broadest sense. And now that the lockdown continues, who knows for how long, this is a learning that we are building our future educational programs on. So instead of just pushing content out there, we have become more aware that it needs to be created and refined in a constant dialogue between the museum educators and people who want to educate and learn outside the museum.
Okay, thank you very much. Anna, maybe I would change a little bit the question. Do you think, how do you think that, how do you frame the importance of this relationship between the physical space of the museum and the online activities? Do you think somehow it's this relationship that we have to work on to, you know, create more opportunities for museums and for visitors and for culture in general?
I think really I agree with what has been said. I think this has been a very difficult time for every one of us, you know, how to adapt to this new reality. It's a time of a lot of disruption, a lot of transformation, a lot of some chaos, I believe. I think it somehow brought the idea that digital is more relevant than ever, because it's for the moment the tool that is more close to us to really be present. I think so many museums have been reactive to this, to try to be more present. I think, of course, I personally I have not visited a museum before, after the museums have reopened, because I'm still a bit scared. And I imagine many people are still a bit scared. So I think it's obvious we can expect that there are not so many visitors. I think that will progressive happen. But I think when we think about the digital and with the physical, I think the both are very complementary. So it's probably we can expect that people that are using, or if not before, are aware of this museum may visit after when it's possible. So these two things, I think it's things in the digital may inform the physical in terms of shaping what can be the experience of the museum. So it's it's quite strange times, but I think one of the things that came out was just to, like Emilia said, just to look at our fragilities, what are our limitations to do more, and probably to really try to overcome, and probably creativity also happens in this process. So I think I think digital will be always a tool. I think it's not a divisive way to see it. Probably some activities will make sense to be just in the physical space. There are other times that the digital is the best means to really get a bigger audience or different audiences. But I think both are very, they can complement each other in that way. And I think digital is not just to be digital in the sense of we don't want to be digital just because we want to be digital, but because digital can also help us to achieve museums' missions and museums' goals. So I think both are very interconnected, and sometimes it's difficult sometimes to see something that is only digital to have an echo in the physical space. There is evidence that sometimes this can help, but we can at least expect that we can work more with in this complementary way.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question is about new generations. Meret talked about younger generations and kids and teachers, and new generations are more easily engaged in the digital challenges and more inclined to explore and adhere to them. However, most of the collections available in platforms like Google Arts and Culture or Europeana consist of digitized objects that do not relate to the technological challenges that these new generations find more appealing, as games or virtual reality. So I would ask, who are the main users of these platforms? And how are these platforms adapting to engage younger generations, but I mean teenagers and young adults? Meret?
Yeah. Actually, I think Europeana is ahead of the curve here because I mean Google is the superpower, and they have funding and means to try out and test almost everything. And to me, Google Arts and Culture is a fairly conservative platform that brings you very nicely produced, sleek content, but it doesn't, I mean, I don't know their user demographics, but I don't suppose that it's the youngsters' go-to website, you know, maybe for school things, I don't know. But Europeana, and here I'm just putting on my Europeana hat because I'm actually very closely connected with Europeana. I've been the chair of the Europeana network for a couple of years. I've been serving on the Europeana Foundation governing board, and now I'm an advisor to the member states about Europeana and digital cultural heritage in the European Commission. I've been part of the group that developed the new strategy for Europeana going forward. And that strategy aims to make Europeana a resource that is so easy and gratifying to use for others that they can easily go and build things with it. So what I mean by Europeana being ahead of the curve here is that in Europeana, there has been a recognition that what a platform like that does well is to garner all of the great content and knowledge and data from European cultural heritage institutions and package it in ways that others can take it and use it. And Europeana then fosters networks and partnerships and ways to work together with other sectors like tourism or gaming industries or virtual and augmented reality companies, the education sector, etc. And I think the idea of not just being a nice website to visit, but being a platform that offers different ways into the content and ways to, for instance, for a gaming company to take that content and create something that will appeal to young people is a strategically sound way to go, because cultural heritage institutions are not necessarily the best equipped places to make something cool for kids, but others can use our content and do that brilliantly. And I think if we think of ourselves more and more as facilitators or catalysts of other people's creativity, I think we've gone a long way.
Yes, so we need more entrepreneurs to take on and develop those contents. Emilia, what do you think? You have this relationship with both Europeana and Google Arts and Culture?
Google Arts project. But I totally agree with Mariette. We don't have neither the human resources nor the talent or the nature to provide all kinds of contents that will satisfy all kinds of followers. So we need to build a network, and we need to provide more clear and rigorous information on our contents so that others can work on it and build up on it and do something better and something different. But we have to be, in a way, we have to be in control of the information we provide, because it has to be accurate, it has to be clear, and it has to be scientific. But then others can play with it. We don't have enough people to do that, and we don't, even if, well, no museum could work with such a horizon, because it's too ambitious. We would need a mega structure, and I'm sure that even the British Museum would struggle with that. So let alone us, we are a tiny museum. But obviously we also don't know who are the people who go to Google Art Project, who follow that platform, who use it. But I'm pretty sure that it's not exactly the teenagers or the kids, probably the kids with a teacher, but not by themselves, because it's not a gaming platform. It's not appealing for them. It's appealing for someone who's already touched by the subject. But we need to do more. And for that, I stress this because I think it's quite important. We have to network. And if we network, we become better. We can reach more people. And that's only a part of being human, because as individuals, we are not such a big deal, but as a group, we are quite powerful.
Thank you. Anna, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, just to comment on, I think, of course, the younger generations are somehow expecting more digital, or to be engaged, that museums should engage with them more digitally. But just to comment that I don't think it's just really not only the younger people are demanding to or expect that. I think I had the idea, of course, that some time ago, that really were the younger people or the younger generations that were expecting this digital engagement, but when I analyzed, and in this task group we analyzed visitor studies for the national museums and the visitors information and replies, we actually understood that there is a very broad scope of people, more than the younger people, that are expecting mediation through the digital. So just to comment on that. But of course, I think it's still very difficult for museums to live up with these expectations, despite many examples. And you mentioned Google Arts and you mentioned Europeana, but if we look at for instance, our Portuguese national catalog for the national museums, we have also a lot of there's a lot of room also to improve, because there is also a tendency to attract more specialized people, or somehow with some professional motivation. Like Emilio said, Google Art project, several national museums in Portugal participated in this project, I think, and there are some technologies that are added to the platform, like augmented reality and others, but of course we don't know yet what is the impact of this platform, and I think it's important actually to find out how this is attracting or not, which audiences is this platform attracting. I think that's important to at least to follow up. I think Moretti already spoke about Europeana, just and I think it has been a very important role even here for us. One project that I have been very, that catch my eye, and I think it really exemplifies a bit what is also the approach, and it's the GIFT project, which is creating tools in open source tools that combine also digital and the physical by mixing several technologies. And I think it's also quite inspiring, because it's also not just to bring up these open source tools. It's still a process, they are still in the process, but not only to give us some open source tools that I think any museum could also try or apply, but it's so interesting how they also present some recommendations about design thinking, about not only the tools, but also how to really approach this application in terms of in the physical space or in the digital, in creating some kind of a hybrid experiences. I think that's also worthy of note to just keep on following. So Europeana, yes, it has been a very source of inspiration in the way it's always trying to change, trying to adapt to these new times.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, when we talk about this digital heritage and about this digitized heritage, we are aware that a complex network of both people and algorithms are shaping these digital presences. And my question, and it's a bit teasing, it's about curation. It's about, should it be the curator's job to act as a filter for this world of digital content? What are the main risks of having this human filtering? Because we all have some questions about the algorithm, of course, but what are the main risks of the human filtering?
Do you mind if I start?
Of course.
Well, curating is always a choice, isn't it? Curating is by definition a choice to choose. And when you choose, you leave something out. You leave a lot of things out. It's what you do in life. You make choices. And it's a human way to work. Of course, there are risks. There are always risks. Nothing is risk-free. But there are also risks with the algorithm, because the algorithm only gives you what it thinks that you want to see. And the curator at least will be able to provide you what they will think, or he or she will think that it's good to be shown. So at least you are dealing with someone that have a different point of view than the one you have, from the one you have. The algorithm will try to reinforce what you already know. So I think that between the risk of having a choice made by a human with all his or her bias, and the risk of having an algorithm doing the same thing for you, but with less possibilities of different perspectives, I will go with the human anytime. I think the digital, the binarium algorithm is also very interesting. I rely on that to have more suggestions on books that I want to find, and sometimes I don't, and suddenly there's the algorithm introducing them to me. It's great. But I think that we should not choose between one or the other. We should again complement, because we are not going to go back to a time where digital did not exist. We are going to live with it. And it's the same every time I hear people complain about digital and complain about the risks of digital and the risks of internet. You know, that's how Nobel decided to create his own prize, his own awards, because he invented dynamite for a very good purpose, and then dynamite was used for war. So everything we invent can have lots of uses, and some of them are not going to be good. You can have a knife and you can use it to put butter on your bread, or you can use it to knife someone in the back. So it's up to you to make the choice. What do you want to do with the knife? And that is the human nature. So of course there are risks with a human curating what you want to see, what you can see, but there are risks in everything. The moment you are born, you run the serious risk of dying. It's not going to end in a different way. So what's the problem with risks? We emphasize them too much.
Well, I'm not really trying to put them to polarize this question between algorithms and curators.
Most times people do.
But I'm not, of course, I'm not doing that. But
can I make a comment?
Just a second. Maybe to rephrase the question, because Emilia said that curating is choosing, but the word curator comes from curare, to take care. And my question is, how can we take care about this filtering? How can we filter taking care? How can we take care of the others by filtering this information? So what are the options? What can we do to improve? I know it's a tough question. Maybe we just can brainstorm a little bit.
Well, I'd like to make a comment because I thought it was really spot on what you said, Emilia. And I think one of the things that we as curators in a broad sense, as museum professionals, need to be aware of in this situation is that we're competing with this frictionless experience that users are getting accustomed to, that they get more of the same that they already feel safe and at home with. And one of the big challenges for museums curators today is to win the hearts of users with something that has more friction in it. Absolutely. Challenging that nice comfort zone that people are in. Because largely we're served information and content via algorithms.
Okay, Anna.
Yeah, I think, of course, like Emily said, just to reinforce, museums are not neutral, curators are not neutral. We all have our blind spots, our biases. So in a way, it's inevitable that we can trigger in a more direct or indirect way some kind of a filter, of course, of the choices that we make, of course, like Emily said. So thinking about the kind of content of that you think it's relevant, the kind of how it can be delivered, or to whom it could be of interest. So there's a lot of filters in a way we do things. I think when you think about options, I think in abstract, I would say that in order to just try to nuance a bit this issue is just to bring more people to the table and bring more people to the discussions and people with different backgrounds, with different perspectives, different expertise and interests. So, and like another idea that was already said before, that is about also cooperation with different partners that may have different ways of seeing things, and so it's also about listening a bit, opening more, and of course be open to unexpected collaborations. I think in that sense, I think there is it's a way of looking at it also. And when I thought this question also is triggered me to think about also the need to invite people and create spaces where people can freely and creatively use collections, use your digital content without your filter, and somehow letting go of this control that sometimes museums tend to be quite passionate about, and just let go of that and let people also use these collections without the filters, the classic filters sometimes the museums impose or curators impose. So just to somehow letting go by creating somehow the space to that, I think.
Okay, so that's a very interesting response, and it leads to my last question, which is about audience participation. So I would like to ask you if this audience participation is a strategy, and I think Anna somehow has already responded a bit to this question, but I would like to know in what ways. Is audience participation a strategy that you believe in as a way to dissolve or mitigate issues of power and knowledge in the museum? And I would like to ask you, how do you see this question? And if you could point out an experience that you have found particularly well succeeded. So my idea is that the museum is the guardian, the keeper, the disseminator of knowledge and authority. And this relationship with audiences generally consists of a top-down approach. And my question is, how can we use this new media, I mean digital technologies, to change this situation and create more bottom-up opportunities where knowledge can be co-created with audiences in a real interactive relationship? So maybe some examples that you have seen or read about, or something like that.
Oh, Rita, may I?
Yes, of course.
Power, knowledge, and control are always words that are used to approach museums. And of course, we have all that, but we also have another word. And that word is another world, actually. It's education. And in education, we tend to include the other. We work with the other to welcome his or her experience. But I would like to give you that same question back. How would you feel at the university if you let go of all the knowledge and the power and control and invite everyone, no matter his or her background, to challenge that knowledge just to become democratic? We have to do it, I think, with an open mind. We have to be quite aware that we all have something to say, something to share. We all have some knowledge in ourselves. We all have some wisdom, probably not exactly knowledge, but wisdom. And we have to be able to welcome all the points of views, but we also have to be quite aware of the importance of keeping a memory and keeping a certain degree of knowledge and a certain degree of accuracy and a certain degree of scientificity around the objects that we have in our guard. So, of course, we are more than willing in museums everywhere, I think, to let people enjoy the objects that we take care of in the way they see fit. But we also have a responsibility to the memory and the inheritance, the heritage they have. So when people talk about power, knowledge, control, sometimes they forget that it's also a responsibility, and we cannot just to make way to other kinds of wisdom, knowledge, power, and control. We cannot just erase the responsibility that it's in our hands. So I think it's a subject that has to be approached with a certain care, and we don't have to be politically correct with this. We have to be aware of the risks and aware of the possibilities. As always, there are many ways possible, and we cannot just go one way and, oh yes, let's all go and welcome everybody with everything. That what if someone would say, let's tear down the museum, let's bomb it? Would we welcome it just because we have to be inclusive to every single opinion? No. So we have to be quite serious about the things. We have to be open, but we cannot have this openness annihilate us. So it's a delicate balance. It's like every time you have two people, you have two different ways of seeing the world, you have to get into a dialogue.
It's interesting because I think that the openness is actually an instrument to stop the risk of being annihilated.
Yes,
because
relevant. Yes, because you become relevant.
But also just because our societies today have become so digitized. That I think we are running quite a grave risk in the cultural heritage sector if we are not present where next generation users are finding their information and looking up their, seeking their knowledge, etc. So we might be very confident and sure about the knowledge that we sit on, but if it's not reaching the people where we're, are they getting the right information? We live in a society where we talk a lot about misinformation. And there's a great new book coming out by Peter Kaufman, who's an American thinker and has worked in cultural heritage archives for decades. and he's coming out with a book called The New Enlightenment. And he's talking about how open data from knowledge creating institutions is a very important part of the 21st century democracy. And if we try to safeguard our knowledge too much from, the osmosis with the surrounding world, we run the risk that the people outside our own circles, the people who don't already agree with us, won't find that information, and it won't be influencing their thinking at all.
I totally agree. I can see that I wasn't clear. What I meant was that we have I totally agree with you. We have to open up, but we also have to be sure of what we are doing. We also have to value what we are doing, not undermine it by unvaluing it and saying, oh, maybe this is not important. No, this is important. This is as much as important as other people's knowledge, but we have a knowledge that we have to share, and to do it, we have to do it we have to do it rigorously, and we have to do it scientifically, emotionally, and openly, but knowing what we are doing and not undervaluating it. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes, I totally understand the way you are responding to this, and I also feel the same about university, of course. But I think we need to think about this and find a balance. Anna.
Just to follow you, it's also the balance, I think we can also have the rigorous, the scientific, and we can also have spaces where we let others we use our collections in the way they feel like it. So it's not something colliding with each other. I think it's possible to have this kind of the rigorous, the scientific, and letting go of this scientific content to be used by whatever people feel that they can, because I think it's important also, people expect that they can also use images, use collections, use that knowledge for their own, in their own turn, also to enable a sense of ownership. I think the both things are possible. And I think many museums have been, of course, trying to do this path. So I think just to end with an example, I think the Rijksstudio, for instance, the Rijksmuseum is, everyone speaks about that example, but I think it's a path, because you have all that knowledge and you're bringing it to people, and people can actually appropriate this content in a way that fits to their needs. So I think there is, of course, a balance and a lot of possibilities to explore. So it's not something exclusive. Just to comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm talking about this audience participation, and we also have some questions from the audience, and I'm ignoring them. So let's see what we have here. We have someone that is asking about the name of the project that Ana Carvalho was mentioning. I don't know when was this?
I can put it in the chat, I think.
So we have here another question. Indeed, the museum is the keeper of collections and has the responsibility to gather and protect our heritage. The digital path should be not only a way to reach out and connect audiences with that heritage, but also should be a path to create content only available outside the same museums and engage new upcoming artists working in those areas. Would you like to comment on that? So the museum is the keeper of the collection, has the responsibility to gather and protect. But the digital path should be not only a way to reach out and connect audiences with that heritage, but it should be a path to create content only available outside museums. I don't know what it really, what it means, only available outside that same museums, and engage new upcoming artists working in those areas.
I think maybe I have a comment for that. I don't know if this, you know, totally relates to this, but the comment makes me think of the sort of the light that we've been looking ahead at for many years at SMK is to foster new creativity with our old collections. And I think maybe this is where this comment is heading, that the only reason we have museums is because people before, in generations before, were creative. And we have this obligation then to preserve and present all these riches. But I think in a digital age, we also have the opportunity to turn these old collections into raw materials for new creativity. Because when you create high quality reproductions, and if you follow the technological development, you can really make something that is very fascinating to work with for artists today. And this is coming back to the platform idea that I talked about before with Europeana. I think one of our most urgent and beautiful tasks today is to make all this fantastic content available for all kinds of people out there. For instance, for the next generations of artists who can build on that heritage that we have piled up and build on it with the new technological tools available today.
So another idea to engage audiences outside the museum. And we have here a very specific question. We already talked a little bit about this, but there's a more specific question. We only have 5 minutes, I think 7. Could you comment on the politics of digitization? Meaning, should museums digitize and make available online 100% of their collections, or should they always make a curatorial selection of what can be accessed by the publics? Meret?
Oh, I'm very much for the. I mean, it's seldom possible, at least for very big collections. But I would love to digitize 100% of our collection, and this is actually inspired very much by the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Because they have been working on digitizing a collection of 1 million objects. And you can easily imagine 1 million objects. You can never put all of that stuff on display. And one person can never, you know, encompass all of that heritage into their system. But the beautiful thing that has happened in the Rijksmuseum when they have digitized so much, such vast amounts, is that all of these objects find a user. They can see that on their statistics. And I think it's a beautiful way to surface heritage that has been buried under, you can say, the consensus of our sector. Because curators are educated in the same schools or the same kinds of schools, so we think a lot along the same lines. But when you just make all of this available, other people who think along other lines will see value in our collections that we are blind to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Anna, are you for or against digitizing?
I'm for. Of course, ideally, it would be amazing, like Meret said, to have all these kind of images, beautiful, or just impressive to just to do whatever we want with them. I think that would be the dream of every curator, I think, to have the collections shown in a way that probably they will never be exhibited in their fullest. So why not to bring to people these treasures we have. So of course it would be ideally, but in practice, and I think about the Portuguese museums, of course, this is not possible in terms of practicalities, because it's too expensive. But I do believe we have a very small amount of collections that are online, so we have to invest. It's the only way, I think, it's the path to go forward. Of course, there has to be investment in digitization, so we can also work with these collections in other ways. But since our budgets are very short, I think probably we must have some criteria to really digitize some collections, probably others not. So probably that will be an issue for many museums, because resources are very limited. So probably there will have to be choices, but of course digitization is a path forward, with no doubt. Yes.
Emilia, I would like to hear your opinion and also your experience about this.
Well, I agree that it would be a dream to have all our collection digitalized. It would be very important for the museum, and it would be obviously important to people everywhere, because if you have, it's the same when you have traveling exhibitions. When you have a traveling exhibition, you have your works sent somewhere else, and then because people see them for the first time connected or in dialogue with other artworks, they can see similarities or differences. They can find new things on these artworks that you thought you knew very well. So when you open, obviously you reach out to more to different audiences, and you reach out to different knowledges, and that will no doubt enrich all the collections, because if you can put all these treasures in the people's hands, they can do nasty things, but they can also do very interesting things, creative things. So it would be a dream to have everything digitalized, everything open, everything in public access. But so far we haven't been able to do it. I'm a dreamer, so I hope that one day we can achieve this. And obviously it will be a terrific tool to new generations, younger generations of creators, because that's what Meret said. We are dealing with the creativity of the older generations, the generations that gave us that patrimony. So we have this almost obligation to provide that memory and that knowledge to somebody else, to use it as they see fit and to be creative about it. And we will all benefit from it, of course, but the thing is money, always.
Yes. Okay, so we are running out of time. We have to close our debate here. I would like to thank you so much for your very interesting and stimulating contributions. That was really easy. We will have now a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back for the next panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
welcome back everyone to our webinar on art, museums and digital cultures. We are now going to start the second panel, and after the very interesting and thought-provoking first part, in which we have addressed several institutional issues, and we have debated art museums in general, this institutional sphere. Now, in the second part of our webinar, we are going to focus on digital or on born digital artworks. And so our topic for the second panel will be curating digital art. Thank you all for accepting our invitation to participate in this discussion. And this second panel will be moderated by Elsa Garcia. Elsa is a journalist. She is the founder and director of Umbigo Art Magazine and also of Umbigo Lab Platform, both based in Lisbon. And well, she will introduce our guest speakers, and I'll leave you with Elsa, and I will come back at the end of the session to say a few words about our international conference. So thank you all.
Thank you, Helena. And I'd like to welcome you all. I would like to welcome you all and introduce our speakers. So we'll have Henrique Salmeiraghi, Cultural Manager and Curator, Founder and Director of Espacio Byte Digital Museum Argentina, José Ramón Alcalá, Artist, Curator and Author, Professor of Art and New Media at the University of Castilla-La Mancha, Spain, Luís Fernandes, musician, sound artist and cultural programmer, founder and artistic director of the Semibreve Festival, artistic director of Generation and Index Braga Media Arts Portugal. And last, Pablo Gobira, curator, researcher and professor at Guignard Fine Art School, Universidade do Estado de Minas Gerais, and the School of Information Science, Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Thank you all for being here. And so my first question is, do you feel that since the start of the pandemic, there is an increasing interest from the general public for digital art? And if is digital art reaching new audiences?
May I start?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay. So hello, it's very nice to be with you all in this webinar. So thank you, Helena and Joanna, MAAT and other chairs for this incredible meeting and partnership. So I'm sorry for my poor English. It's a little bit savage, I think. So about the question, I don't see that there is a greater interest in digital arts in the post-pandemic, or greater interest. So I believe there was a need to better understand this field, because people who didn't work in it before the pandemic started now is producing some digital works or artworks. So I believe that now 8 or 9 months after the pandemic, we have a better condition to introduce people without much resistance to the reflections of this field between relation in arts, science, and technology. So it's more easy to introduce people to this field, and we don't have a resistance for it. At least I don't see all the resistance fall yet. So I see that new audience have been reached because of this need to know more about digital arts. Now I believe that we will need to qualify this public and these new producers. As an undergraduate and graduate professor, I'm proposing courses related to the field. So, for example, next semester, I will work in recurring courses of fundamentals of digital arts and the creatorship of digital arts, also seeking to contribute with this qualifications. So I think that's it for a start, at least.
Okay.
If I may, I would say that there's a strong difference between the medium, which is digital, in fact, and it got a significant increase since the pandemic. But the content, or like Marshall McLuhan would say, the medium and the message. In this case, the medium is not the message. What I think is the digital medium, in fact, has suffered a huge increase, but not necessarily digital art, because digital art is not, it's not made out of streaming, or it can be, but not necessarily. So I don't think there was a bump in digital art. I don't feel it, actually. What I feel is a strong, let's call it, difference between the rise of the medium, of the digital medium, and the lack of strong and purely or built from scratch digital art. Digital art is not like taking advantage of this new exposure or necessity of the digital means as communication to impose itself. Basically, as everyone can attest, we were bombarded with a huge array of streamings, concerts, etc. But a true exploration of digital means, on my perspective, wasn't explored so far.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. And I want to thank Helena Barranha and Joana Enriquez for inviting me to join this webinar today. It's always enriching to share ideas with colleagues. So thinking about the new audiences, what I could say is that since the pandemic broke out and social distancing, we can say, became a norm, there was a big interest in online recreation and remote education. And this circumstance was sadly, but at the same time, a good advantage for those platforms that were already running on the network. This is the case of Espacio Byte, which is an online museum I'm running since 2013. And since lockdown, we started to have a great press coverage of our exhibitions. And we also started to have new queries about our activities. And this is a good thing because that is making the museum to reach a wider audience. And we know that because of the type of queries we have, we are reaching a wider public which were not aware of digital practices. So what I think is that this extraordinary situation could be an opportunity for digital art to rise to the surface of contemporary art. Even though today you can find a lot of digital art spreading out in social networks, which many artists have been using as environments to show their work, but that big production, it is scattered on the internet with little contextualization. So I think this phenomenon should be accompanied not only by strong exhibition programs, but also with a coherent conceptual and historical frame. It is time to strengthen the diffusion of digital art and to talk about their modalities, practices, and inherent issues. So since online offerings are the only way of interaction with the art world today, I think this could be a moment to take advantage and make an effort in trying to reach new audiences into digital art. I mean, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, good afternoon.
Thank you to everybody. Thanks to Helena and to the organizers to invite me and to participate in this very interesting event. I totally agree with my colleagues, what they say. I completely agree. But I would say something else, or more than that, is that we are digital. We are digital from a decade to now. We've still been digital. And it means that COVID, the pandemic, has provided us the opportunity of living the natural way of living that a digital humans and digital beings have to live. Institutions, all of them are still being analogical, and digital art maybe is at the front, in the front of the avant-garde of the way of understanding, of constructing this new life. Our daily life is a life which is managing in this space between screens. From the commercialization of the smartphones, so the ubiquitous and instant internet that go with us every day, in every moment, don't permit us to be out from that. This famous sentence of post-internet, no? Post-internet was the moment that the artist switched off the computer and still living her daily life, the analogical life. But this is not possible anymore. We are anytime, all the time living in this hybrid reality and managing this hybrid reality that pandemic forced us to manage, to live. So for me, now we are arriving to the crucial point that finally our digital lives can be running out as a natural way of being. So this is my point of view. We finally found, from art, digital arts to digital society, the way of managing, the way of living this new situation.
Yeah, because the pandemic brought this too. I think there's a lot of people saying that they are fed up with the digital life because now everything is digital and people now want to go back. And how do you feel this? Do you feel that people are really getting out of digital, wants to be out of digital life because of everything now is digital?
But you know, for a digital living, for a digital organism, there is no consciousness of being digital. If you are digital, you have no the perspective of being as such. So the only people who wants to go out from digital is the people who is not digital, and this is the people from the 60s until you know older. But young people, people from 40 years old people are digital, so they have this consciousness. It happened in my media art classes in the Faculty of Fine Arts in Cuenca. My students are digital, so they have no consciousness of doing digital art or having a digital life or constructing a digital culture. No, this is wrong. Now we still being painters, artists, or creators, or whatever. And in our essence, we are digital. So this is something we cannot think anymore. This is my opinion, at least, no?
I think it makes perfect sense what Jose just said. Let me just add the following. I was very unpolite. I didn't thank everyone for your presence and the invitation. Sorry, I was really focused on the answer. But like Jose was saying, I think maybe we should think of removing the digital from the art, because like he said, we are digital. This is just another tool. Being digital, or I don't think it makes as much sense as it did 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And this is really a really interesting point that Jose brought.
Now, another question is like, since art fairs start moving online, and even though many of them are currently happening online, there is very little space for born digital art. We can feel a certain traditionalism, and original digital artworks are practically non-existent, which is a paradox. Do you think that is there resistance from artists in exploring digital art? And when do you think this reality will change?
Let me start again. So I believe that there is indeed resistance that is falling year by year. I agree with Professor Jose Ramon. I see that the pandemic has accelerated the fall of this resistance that has shifted to information control by social networks. We are seeing this old criticism about platform capitalism and something like that. But I believe that this resistance we will also have to overcome with mechanisms that we are seeing corporation owning the social media implement to guarantee more transparency and access to data. So perhaps, as is happening in Brazil with the mediation of laws of Brazilian National Congress, for instance, it's happening about specifically about digital arts, or as I prefer to call them, so art produced in relation with science and technology. I think we have an accelerated mix happening just by now, and people that don't produce digital arts in my school, my university, are producing now. So it's creating another movement that I think we will feel in 2021 more clearly. So I'm waiting for it. Okay, that's it.
Well, I think that many curators that are involved in art fairs or art centers are mainly embedded into art theories related to traditional art practices, and the artists which are usually invited are the ones working on those paths. So on the other hand, digital art has a different materiality, has its own history, formats, languages, and also has developed its own theories, which sometimes implies a different vision of art. So working on digital art curating implies a complicated interplay between technological assemblages of hardware, software, and of course, the collaboration of different kind of specialists. Each exhibition means an interaction between coders, designers, media technicians, and curators to help on the organization of the digital space. And due to the nature of digital objects, I think we could group them into a different kind of economy. While traditional art could be circumscribed within an economy of scarcity, digital art could be thought within an economy of abundance. If we consider that digital objects are, well, distributable, open, and they have a modular nature, the idea of a unique object could be obsolete. We also have artists who have been practicing digital art, and they work with different languages, techniques, formats that require a deep understanding of digital tools and devices. and that takes time for experimentation, researching. So it's not so easy to get involved into digital art practices from one day to another. What is perceived is that some artists, traditional artists, we can say, had been exploring some elements or tools or languages of digital art, but to produce a final physical artwork. So I think that it will take some time for most of the artists to migrate into pure digital production. And that will also depend on the art market and how will the market react after this pandemic, or well, in the future.
Yeah, I also think that most of the digital art, let's call it still digital art, is kind of ephemeral, or it doesn't have a physical presence sometimes. And as you can imagine, on the traditional art world, it's quite different to buy a sculpture than to buy a line of code. It's completely different. It's a new paradigm. So, and this also poses a lot of other questions. That, for example, the collections. How do you conserve and maintain a physical, digital art piece? Sometimes they are based on technology that, if not obsolete, it will become obsolete in a very short period. I have this example of an artist friend that sold an extremely interesting piece of art to a well-known Canadian museum, which was, like, I will spare the details, but it was based on Twitter feeds. And they said, we need to know how to set up the piece, and we need to keep it on the collection for at least 100 years. And he said, look, I don't know if Twitter will exist in 100 years. So I don't know if the piece, if you can still run the piece by then. So this is just an example of how traditional museums are kind of not as much as they were a few years ago, but they are still very distant from this new paradigm of creating digital art. And of course, this translates into the art world, the art fairs, etc.
In my opinion, I totally agree. But in my opinion, the problem is coming from the two directions. Because initially, when the net art pioneers artists in the early 90s start working on internet, this internet 1.0, they discover that there was a chance to have a parallel art world. What's the problem? The problem is that they become older, famous, and they wanted to be recognized by the museum, by the traditional museum, because the museums, by the other side, decided that they don't want to lose their power, their position, their central position. So they are doing a lot of efforts to transform themselves into a space capable to take care of this virtual art, this new art. But the beginning of the art, of the net art, of the digital art, was more complicated, because that was the internet 1.0. It means a dark screen that you go inside, okay, and then you have to go outside. But now digital art is spread all around things, networks, smartphones, whatever things, okay? So net art is everywhere, but not in the traditional art market, in the traditional art field. So why net artists still trying to be inside, making their works, transforming into a horror Frankenstein pieces to be able to participate in the traditional physical museum? And why museums don't understand that they have to convert into a art historical museums of art historian? they're two separate worlds. They are two separate behaviors. So it will be more simple if we focus on to create a ecosystem, a complete autonomous system for our daily life, which is digital, and leave the traditional analogical art museums to continue doing what they have done, maybe digitalizing some things and trying to arrive to more clients, more people, more users, and then transform themselves. But this is my position. Why we don't separate and take clear that there are different things? This is my opinion.
Jose, how do you think should be created this ecosystem for the digital art or art born digital?
The system is created. We have a lot of problems, but it is created. The problem is when, and for example, there is, you know the Wrong Biennale, the Wrong Biennale, curated and directed by one Spanish art curator, David Quiles. This Biennale is the most important digital Biennale nowadays, and produce thousands of events, works, artists, and it functions perfectly. It put each edition put in function, and after the 2 months of the events, disappear completely. Nothing happened. No, there is no race. There is no traces about that. This is digital. It's a condition of digital. Okay, and this is enough. Everybody is happy to do that. There are many thousands of normal people that every day connect to Google Art museums, social online networks of cyberpunk artists, exchange things through Instagram or whatever. This is the daily life. Art has changed. Art is not the top of a representation of power, and this is the past. The present is that art is democratized and it's for everybody, and everybody enjoy of that. And there is no problems about history, permanency, being forever, all these things that net artists, pioneer net artists, trying to erase, to abandon. Okay, this is my opinion.
Okay. And now for you, Jose, before the internet, and being a pioneer in the creation of an archive of electronic and digital art in 1989, the International Museum of Electrography, which problems did you face at the time, and how did you start your collection?
Yes, thank you. Sorry for speaking so much.
No problem.
Thank you. That's right. When we create the MIDE, the Museum of International Artworks, in 1990, there were two very interesting young artists and curators that get in and start working inside, who was Ricardo Echevarria and José Luis Brea. Maybe all of you know Brea, José Luis Brea. José Luis Brea was my colleague, was teaching at the Faculty of Fine Arts of Cuenca, like me. And we all together create alepharts.org. Aleph Arts was one of the first digital web page, no, digital space for creating, curating, etc. One of the big problems were the idea of interface, because in 1990, the idea of internet and digital world was to make a copy of simulating the real world. So there were things like Second Life, okay, or this kind of mimetic, naturalistic world inside our screens. But finally, Brea demonstrates that if you get culture to these new users, digital users, we didn't need a simulation of the art world. everybody would understand, running the years, what means hypertext, hyperlink, hypermedia. Everybody understood to click on a link and go into another place. So this minimal new situation was the solutions of the first big problems of how to represent this virtual world that we are constructing, okay? And there are many of them, but I'm going to take two. The second one is the idea of preservation. This is a very big problem for digital art because the obsolescence of everything, software, hardware, etc., are doing that most of the past digital artworks cannot be accessed. So this is a huge problem. And we are working hardly on that. We're working hardly because the solution is not what the new Museum of New York has taken, which is we are going to reprogram everything now into HTML. No, we are moving from Flash, we're moving from Lingo and Director to HTML. No, this is not the solution because that will be obsolete too in few years. So a lot of money, millions of dollars have been spent on reprogramming all the pieces. And this is not the solution. The solution is data centers. Data centers are places where you can put inside the whole old, new, contemporary hardware and software. And they simulate everything that arrives to our screens, making possible to still functioning, to still running, to still navigating, to still interacting with these multimedia interactive pieces with Director in 1993, for example, okay? Well, this is a first idea. I prefer that my colleagues speak because they are really interesting people and I don't want to speak so much, but this is an answer, maybe an answer.
Anyone wants to comment? And now, Luis, what makes a city, in this case Braga, to be considered by UNESCO as a creative city of media arts?
Okay, so for those who don't know, basically UNESCO as this category of what they call creative cities, which basically are cities that have a compromise on putting a specific artistic domain on the center of its general policies. So the municipality of Braga have decided that based on some events that already happened on the city since 2010, more or less, and because of the nature of the city, for those, I bet most of you don't know Braga, of course, but Braga is a small city in the north of Portugal, but it has a very strong tradition on IT, research, technology. It was back in the days called the Portuguese Silicon Valley. A lot of enterprises were bought by Microsoft, etc. So there was already a very strong dynamic towards IT and like coding, etc. Then with some other events and also SemiBrev, which I'm part of, this like digital domain also reached the arts, specifically the arts programming. So it was thought that each year that went by, Braga was more leaning towards this like position of a city that welcomes the media arts and it has this desire of basing its cultural policies on the relationship between art and technology. So there was a decision of like applying to this title, which means having like a broad program, an action plan that basically demonstrates and commits the city to have a program that favors education, cultural programming, interaction with our heritage and like our history, and also with the well-being of the population, And since 2017, we were awarded with the title. So over the past few years, our focus has been actually divided on different levels. First of all, we established educational service from scratch that is it starts or is based on generation, but it spreads throughout the city, and it has activities everywhere, and it partners with other festivals and other institutions and museums to bring this relationship between art and technology to the entire community. Then we also, of course, reinforce the programming of digital arts on the venues that serve the city. And of course, we established new collaborations with academia, with Minho University, which is very strong, like I said, in terms of the new technologies. We are even working in the creation of new courses dedicated to the arts, and of course, specifically in art and technology. So it's been I would say long, but very sustained and detailed process. And so far it has been real rewarding. We can feel that people are increasingly aware of what digital art is, what art and technology is, and we hope to continue the process.
And if you would like please to talk a little bit more about Generation and Semibrev that you work with and in the programmation that you bring to the city.
Yeah, well, the Semibrev, for those who don't know, is a festival that is based on exploratory electronic music, and it runs in Braga since 2011. Actually, this year on this weekend, we will have our 10th edition, which this year, of course, is entirely online, with a physical component very limited on this beautiful monastery we have in Braga. And the festival has been I think it was the trigger also for this whole media art movement in the city, because since day one, we were fortunate to have an impact in terms of the international network of electronic music festivals, the more experimental ones. And for me as a programmer, it was also my first experience that led me to work then on this art center that is called Generation. And it was a former military police, we call it GNR in Portugal, that was converted in a multifunctional space. It's an art space, but it's also a space that hosts startups, for instance. And this has also been a rewarding process, that because we mostly deal with art and technology and contemporary music. And we kind of fulfill this need of having experimental music showcased in the north of Portugal. Of course, other entities do it really well as well, but we kind of found our own place on the overall programming logic of the north of Portugal. And we, of course, we run exhibitions, we run shows, workshops. Well, our activity is very broad, and we hope also to keep doing it for the next years.
Thank you, Luis.
Thank you.
And now, Henrique, Espacio Byte. So, frequently designed as virtual museums, online exhibition spaces as Espacio Byte have been fundamental in the dissemination of the digital art, allowing a free access to art and information. How is the concept of a purely online exhibition shaped, and what are the audiences of these web-specific museums? We are not listening to anything.
Okay, now?
Okay.
I was saying that regarding to my experience running an online museum, also organizing online exhibitions outside the museum platform, as Jose Ramon was saying, I collaborated with the Rome Biennale, 2 opportunities. I could say that the criteria behind my curatorial projects are to highlight the multidimensionality of digital art practices and to explore different points of views, thoughts, and issues which are not related only to the medium itself, but also to search for the topics which are relevant for the artist and society. And if I have to think about some specificities of curating digital art, I would say that one of the most important tasks is to make a big effort in organizing the chaotic information and the multiplicity of digital art forms that host the internet. And this is because digital art are always mutating, adopting new formats, combining languages, spreading through social networks. It has a different kind of movement in comparison to traditional art. Digital ecosystems change faster. So big part of making an online exhibition is the big research behind the exploration of the digital universe, trying to find new artists, emerging trends, new practices. I think digital art curator is a sort of radar trying to find those signs. And then we have our specific creative field, which is how we arrange the digital space. And there's always a complex combination and interplay between technological assemblages, as I said before, of hardware, software, to achieve a good, well, exhibition. We must consider the different devices, such as tablets, mobiles, PCs, I mean, the interface from where the artwork will be shown, experienced. At Espacio Byte, we have a general layout, which gives the museum its own identity and also help to organize the whole information for each show. But well, sometimes, you know, artists have strong ideas on how to show their work. Sometimes, of course, they don't. And I can say that the digital art exhibition is a collaboration between the curator, the artist, and, as I said, the interface. So each exhibition brings a new technological challenge, and it is necessary to apply media techniques and coding different coding levels to traditional notions of curating. Digital objects have a different materiality. So we must say that digital space also has its own limitations. There's also, I can say, there's also a narrative behind each show, a story the artist or, well, the curator always want to tell. And sometimes the narrative this dictates how the works will be displayed. And that usually involves, well, coding, programming languages. And then another important point is the audience, of course, which is something to, you know, care about, because in my experience at Espacio Byte, working in a museum where we have a big range of public, we must think about the different layers of information we will need to prepare. And you also ask about our audience, and well, we have among our visitors, we have students from different fields, art, psychology, philosophy. We also have art teachers, people in general interested in digital art, artists, of course, and also potential new visitors. We're always thinking about that. So I consider that the audience is a crucial point. Related to the visitors, an online exhibition also present a different kind of engagement between the viewer and the artwork. And if we consider some devices such as tablets, we could have a multi-sensory experience. On a mobile, for example, the viewer can hold a piece of art in their hand and manipulate its forms by, well, editing, augmenting the view. That could be a more tactile experience. We have a more embodied connection with the digital object. And I think that within a natural exhibition frame, we could have a deeper understanding of the work. Another thing I can say is that in online shows, there's a different relationship within the artwork, which implies a more intimate experience. So, as I said, there's always a combination of hardware and software we must consider in the making of an online show. And to answer the question about having new audiences, due to the lockdown, right? As I said before, since the growing interest in online recreational offerings, we're having new visitors and also the ones which were not into digital art practices before. So I think those are the main aspects I consider as relevant in the making of an online exhibition.
Thank you, Enrique. Now I have a question to Pablo. Pablo, considering working in a lab of digital poetry, what difficulties did you have in creating limits in these creative practices that very often questions the frontiers between visual, arts, literature, and music?
Let me, first of all, I have to say something about what our colleagues said before. First of all, I have to say that I thank again Helena and Joanna for this invitation. I can listen a lot. I want to listen a lot about Jose Ramon was saying about digital arts and the preservation of arts. It's very interesting for me because I work with the both areas of documentation, information science, and also arts. I'm a professor from both schools in two different institutions, two different a federal university and a state university. So I wanted to listen more about these things from Jose Ramon because of his experience. I want to add before this, the idea of preservation, digital preservation, that I agree. He was saying about the need to create data centers, and in these data centers create some kind of preservation. In science formation, in information science, we have at least four ways to preserve the digital information, and we apply this kind of techniques in digital arts, in one kind of digital arts, that is migration, emulation, documentation, and recreation. This is four mainly ways to do the preservation, digital preservation, and I'm very familiar with this. But we have problems with all this kind of preservation, and I think for this I have to say I'm thinking the notion of digital arts a little broad notion then my colleagues, I was thinking about digital arts not only linked to net art, for example, or generative art, or computer art. I was thinking, I'm thinking, and it's my object of study in robotic art, for example, bio art, and I think it's all in the same same system that José Ramon Alcalá was saying. It's a system of this art produced after the digital appears in the social world, and we can use this kind of technology, digital technology, and the impact of this technology in arts create a kind of new ecosystem, as you said, and it's all difficult to preservation or to access this art after exhibition, for example. So about the question, I'm a director of a research group called Laboratório de Poéticas Fronteiriças, or Laboratório of Front Poetics. Here in Brazil, we treat all creative production as poetics, and as artistic poetics, we consider the arts, all arts, on this spectrum, not only the poetry. So the Laboratório de Poéticas Fronteiriças that I direct is not laboratory of production only of poetry, but poetics. In this way, we produce artistic poetics or artistic productions widely. So we create digital games, interactive installations, applications, poems, among others creative productions. That said, I have been working for many years with production in the field of arts and digital culture and curatorship of digital objects. I see the multiplicity and complexity of this field as one of its most remarkable qualities, and not it's not really a problem for me. I see that the hybridism brought by subfields of digital arts results from a relationship of boundaries. So among these fields, I'm very interested in how digital games are composed of hybridism of expressions linked to cinema, literature, music, photography, and design in all manners. I have also been interested in digital theater, which has brought itself the same mixture between diverse artistic fields involving interactivity and game mechanics. So this year I have collaborated with productions in this field of border relations between digital theater and digital games. At this moment, I'm even giving a course about digital games, interactive narratives in theater. So this course is being offered in a digital theater training program. So in fact, I can't imagine that artists create boundaries or limits for their aesthetics productions in creative work, but artists explore these boundaries or cross these boundaries. So it's precisely this possibility of exploring and crossing boundaries that attracts me within the field of digital art creation. So I'm very interested in this, and of course, not only production, but what remains after the exhibition or the use of an app, whatever. So that's it. I think I answer you. So
yeah,
if you have more.
I'm picking this question every hybrid format. With the existence of more and more hybrid formats, does it still make sense to talk about the dichotomy between physical and digital artworks?
Let me continue. I said I will try to talk a little less. So we continuously see the insistence to consider some expressions of digital arts as if they were immaterial expressions. But what we see, in my point of view, is that the more we deepen the reflections in the field, more clear becomes that digital arts are not immaterial. For me, it's a point. the perception of supposed materiality is due to information character in large part of the works formed by operation of their codes. I think it's the point of this. However, this does not mean for me that the work of art is immaterial, but rather than that we do not have immediate access to tangible materiality. Every digital artwork for me has materiality, physicality in somewhere. So that thing José Ramon Alcalá was talking about, the creation of preservation data centers. We have always somewhere where the digital arts, same that coding ones will be. So we have data centers, hard disk, for example, accessible through interfaces. The point of interface José Ramon was saying is very important for this. What happened is people forget that the machines were materially produced. So they forget that the internet is materially supported. So even if these were not the signs of the materiality of technology reality, we have more possibilities to make born digital art tangible, physically. It happens mostly through, for example, digital manufacturing, or even by presence of art through blockchain tokenization. And the blockchain tokenization, I think it's a very possible, and it's happening today, nowadays, to create a part of art market for digital arts, as José Ramon was saying, being part of a new ecosystem of digital arts. So it can create a kind of digital arts that are saleable, collectible, shareable. So I think it's a very good possibility. And I see another actors from the art market, traditional art market, getting this kind of ideas and using, for example, the Christie's. Christie's uses create a partnership with another corporations that thinking about digital arts in collectible way, and are thinking the use of blockchain as a form to create this possibility of share the art. So that's it, I think.
Okay. Elsa, I would like to contribute to your question about the relations between analogical and digital. And I would like to do with another question. Do we consider a building built by a 3D printer a digital architecture? It means now the construction digitally of anything can be printed out from the virtual world to the physical world. 3D printers can do it whatever. They can print out blood, cellular, bionics, architecture, a sculpture, a painting, a reproduction of the Altamira caves, prehistorical caves. So today it's really impossible to separate, to distinguish between digital and analogical. The main frame is everything is related to digital because we are digital and the world is prosthetic. We are prosthetic beings. So this is my answer. It's just a question.
Okay. It's not a question, it's an answer. I agree, totally agree. We have the possibility of actualization of the virtual nowadays. That's the movement we have.
Yeah. Now we have two questions from the audience, one to Luis and the other one to Henrique. So to Luis is, as Luis Fernandes said, some digital artwork is interconnected with the hardware that it uses as mainframe and interface. Sometimes it is even interconnected with the operating system it runs in. Can we move on discard the dusty PCs and start to read lines of code through the eyes of poetry? In a couple of words, how would you describe the perfect curated digital art exhibition?
That's a good
This is
one.
for Luis.
That's a good one. Well, I thought that Jose said something really interesting in one of his first interventions, that maybe as we are, as quoting Jose, digital beings in a digital world, maybe we can assume that the experience of art can be also ephemeral. So in that case, maybe the dusty PC, which probably in 2 years won't work anymore, maybe we can stop worrying too much about preserving the dusty PC and just move on to other works. Of course, this is not this is a provocative position, because the work matters, and the history of the artworks still matters, and we should find ways to document it and make them live a little bit longer. But actually, the idea of it being ephemeral might not be such a bad idea, and maybe it's what we will be obliged to do in the future. As for the perfectly curated, I don't think there's such thing. Each one of us has different perspectives of what that might mean. And personally, I don't like perfect stuff. I like imperfections. Human imperfections are what makes us unique. But I would say something which all of us that work with technology and exhibitions like feel on a daily basis. I love exhibitions that do not keep bugging and not working properly all the time, which is sometimes it's a real nightmare. Like complex artworks that this system like collapses and then it crashes and we have to shut down the exhibition. Of course, this is a totally different answer, but a problem that I think we all at some point pass by. I hope it was a good answer. Thank you for the question.
And now it's for Enrique. Enrique told us that the digital universe and space have some limitations, but in truth, the physical world within a traditional museum has its own limitations. Maybe we are still expecting to be able to access all the entire forms of digital art using a single frame. Instead of mimicking reality, can you briefly describe as the perfect utopic digital space?
Well, when I meant the space limitations, that is because we need different languages, programming languages, coding languages, technologies, and sometimes it's impossible to organize the exhibition in the way we would really like to, because it needs a lot of resources. As Jose Ramon was saying before, the way we preserve art at Espacio Byte is by documentation, because we don't have all the resources to develop emulators. If we want to show, for example, we just launched an exhibition related to computer virus from the DOS era, and we came with a big problem in how to show them, because those viruses functions are a different operating system. So we used the emulators. We found a platform on the internet. So we used that platform in order to make the exhibition possible. So what we do at Espacio Byte is to document all the exhibitions and the works, because we also think, as Luis Fernandez was saying, about this kind of, I would say, not permanent state of digital art, of these ephemeral conditions. So we really work on documentation, and if we have to show and work with, well, obsolete programming languages or artworks which operated in different operating systems, we use the technology we can find on the internet, and those platforms where are open and are collaborative projects.
Okay. Now we only have a few minutes left, and we have another question from the audience. That is, this sounds like an off-topic question, so here's the thing. Suppose someone sent you photos of objects in which each one has a different view perspective. The purpose of this is to put them in a specific collection created in a museum repository. How should we show those same photos in that collection, knowing that it's the same object? And I'm talking about when we are creating a virtual museum with a WordPress plugin called Técnico. This is the question.
I didn't understand the last part of the question.
I'm talking about when we are creating a virtual museum with a WordPress plugin called Técnico. With a T, Técnico.
That's a very specific question.
Yeah. I think so, but
I know the plugin Técnico. Técnico makes the WordPress blog appears like a collection of visual items, and it's applied in a lot of museums here in Brazil. I don't know if it's only in Brazil, but I know here in Brazil the Técnico. But I don't understand the question because of in a repository we have a lot of images. It's a photography of an object. We have a lot of images. It's necessary, in my opinion, make the documentation of this object in a lot of forms, a lot of ways, like photograph, videos, maybe 3D modeling, and the Técnico accept all of this kind of documentation of this object that was object of a collection. So I don't know if it's the answer for this question.
Okay. Okay, we don't have much time left, but I would like to ask you if you have something to add to our conversation, if any one of you would like to say something else.
Well, maybe I would like to thank you. Is one of the biggest problems for museums, traditional museums, to manage digital art is the problem of property, of copyrights, okay? Because when you want to show a digital event through internet, it is, of course, able to be pirated, okay, to be copied, to be used. And this is not a problem for the digital art world because it's one of the principles, okay? Please use it. Please copy left, please share it. But when you are talking about a traditional analogical museum, they have a lot of problems with this is a copy of the original, how many original there are, if it's the property of the artist or who is the owner. And this is really a mesh, you know, and that's why we consider to use data centers and use all this digital technology for not being outside in the digital world. It means internet. Is just creating intranets, just creating a direct connection between the original material and the user and this final screen you know. So this is something that I just wanted to talk about, a problematic, about a very important questions that sometimes produce a very refused from the analogical art world to the digital art world. And also the digital artists are not, has not a consensus between, you know, a commitment between these questions. Some of them are, you know, about this, some of them are contrary. So this is a question I just launched on the webinar.
Okay, so I think we now Helena will talk, but before that, I would like to thank so much all of you for such important contributions. I think all of you add really good food for the thought in this debate and in this conversation. Thank you so much. And now, Helena.
Okay, so I would like to start by saying thanks for your contributions. I think we have gathered many interesting open questions to be clarified, to be addressed in future debates. And talking about future debates, before closing the webinar, I would like to introduce our International Conference on Art, Museums and Digital Cultures, which will take place in April 2021. Just like today's webinar, this conference is a collaboration between the Museum of Art, Architecture and Technology, MAAT, in Lisbon, and the Institute of Art History at the Nova University of Lisbon, under the scope of a new cluster. Some of you are already part of this new project, a new cluster on art, museums and digital cultures. So this is all connected. And following this webinar, the conference aims at discussing how museums, curators, and the artists themselves are responding to the opportunities, but also to the risks of the so-called digital transformation. We want to question this by recognizing the complexity and the plurality of digital cultures. And this is why we use the word in plural, digital cultures, because we want to embrace this multiplicity of cultures that deal with the digital and are part of the digital, as José Ramon also emphasized. So the conference will afford visibility to recent or ongoing research projects in different geographies and cultural contexts. We already have a website. I will show you a few images just for a better perception. I think that you can now see our cover image of the cover image of our conference. And I show you this image because I want to point out that the call for papers is now open, and we're inviting scholars, independent researchers, media specialists, curators, and artists to submit proposals for a 15-minute presentation with the subsequent publication that we are planning, focusing on topics such as, the list is long, I will just pick a few topics. For example, the preservation, documentation, and exhibition of digital art, or the digitization of contemporary art collections and archives, virtual museums and online exhibitions, contemporary art and digital literacy, or the politics of online mediation, the problem of segregation and inclusion, among other topics and issues. You can find this full list on our website, where you can also find all the details about the conference, and we'll be updating the website on a regular basis. And so the website itself is museumdigitalcultures.weebly.com. The deadline for the call for papers is the 21st of December, so before the Christmas break. You still have around 2 months to send us your proposals. And I also invite the audience who has that has joined today for the webinar to send us proposals or just to go on with this debate, which from our point of view is extremely fruitful and inspiring. Well, finally, and because we are running out of time, and I guess that everyone wants to have lunch for you who are in the south part of the world, and for us, maybe a glass of wine or something like that. So I will just finish by thanking to all the participants, especially our guest speakers, our moderators, the audience as well. And it's been wonderful to follow your ideas, your comments, your questions. And I'm sure that this will be extremely important to prepare the conference and to promote a wider debate on topics that are very much open and at stake nowadays. So we'll like to fuel this debate throughout the upcoming months, and we hope to stay in touch. Last but not least, I would like to address a huge thanks to our team, both at MAAT and at the Institute of Art History. Thanks for everyone's contributions. And that's it. I think we should stay in touch. I wish you all a very good evening and thanks a lot. Bye-bye.